Don't you have other things to do? Carter asked seriously. Nope, Melvin said. You know I'm very free. Fair enough. Compared to his past life as a social elite, Melvin did have a lot of free time in the present. Lights out was at 10 in the evening. They rose from bed at 6 in the morning, and aside from the 3 hours of afternoon break, the rest of it was spent endlessly planting strawberries. It also happened that this period of time was also the fruiting period for strawberries in Southside Prison. If it were Carter, he would also find a little something to occupy himself with. Then don't add so much sugar next time, Carter said. All right. After the long chat, the central bank had already released the stats. As usual, Carter read everything to Melvin. But after he finished today, Melvin suddenly looked at him and asked, "Where do you want to start first?" Start. Carter assumed that it was Melvin's thought processes beginning to play leapfrog again, yet heard him say, "Didn't you want to learn stock trading?" Carter had almost forgotten this. After all, he had only expressed a wish to learn stock trading to tease Melvin, but had never taken it to heart. But in view of the solemnity with which Melvin took this duty, he could only harden his neck and say, "What causes stock prices to change?" It's simple. The price rises when many people buy it, and it falls when many people sell, said Melvin. Then how do you analyze whether a stock is going to rise or fall? Carter continued to ask. It depends on various factors, said Melvin. I'll teach you how to read the candlestick chart first. Melvin moved the mouse while explaining to Carter what the different numbers on the screen signified. As he was seated closer to the screen than him, Carter could only read it with his head tilted. At this time, Melvin was speaking of the data on his side of the screen over there. Due to the reflection of the light on the screen making it hard to read, Carter was forced to shift his body closer to Melvin until even the tips of his hair were brushing against the other man's ears. Melvin inclined his head over slightly, glancing at Carter. Then he let go of the mouse and circled his arm around Carter's shoulders before holding the mouse again. Can you see it better now? Now, Carter was indeed closer to the screen. But the problem was, how did he somehow wind up in Melvin's embrace again? Their shoulders were pressed against each other's chest, in the model posture that a pair of lovebirds would sit in. Carter unconsciously turned his head over to look at the arm that was circling around him. But at this moment, Melvin abruptly let go of the mouse away to press a hand to the side of his face, pushing his head back. Focus, said Melvin. Just how was he supposed to focus like this? Carter couldn't help but find it weird. Do you teach others how to trade stocks like this too? Carter frowned. Of course not, Melvin said. This is special treatment for Officer James. He paused, then added, or you can sit on my lap so you can see the screen more clearly. There's no need for that. Carter glared at Melvin and continued to act like he was studying seriously. And what's this number for? Carter had to admit that he was feeling a teensy bit of regret. He wasn't that interested in stocks and had only given himself such a persona to tease Melvin. Little did he expect that Melvin would actually get addicted to teaching and seem to have no intention to stop at all, rattling off explanations of various terms, making Carter flash back to his schooling days. Carter frequently checked his watch, and when watch hands finally pointed to 9:30, he immediately straightened up. Time's up, we can talk about this next time. There's a more important point. You must keep your composure when trading stocks. Don't just jump blindly. Teacher, Carter hurriedly interrupted Melvin. That's enough for today. It won't be too late to continue tomorrow. Melvin looked at Carter. He asked, What did you call me? Teacher Zach. Teacher Zach seemed greatly pleased with this address, and he finally let go of the mouse. See you in the afternoon, then. This afternoon won't do, said Carter. Some government officials with enterprises are dropping by for a visit. I have to accompany them. They would host groups that came to survey the prison on occasion, mostly as a deterrent against committing crimes. It was the warden's job to receive these groups, but Carter guessed that it was probably related to Melvin for the warden to have asked him to tag along. They want to visit the strawberry shed. After listening to Carter's explanation, Melvin asked, seemingly pensive. Yeah, your case is relatively high profile. You know the way it is. It was difficult for visitors to develop a resonance from inmates they couldn't recognize. Conversely, it was more effective as a deterrent for them to watch the prison life of someone they personally saw incarcerated. "If you're unwilling to, you can let the warden know," Carter said. "He would probably agree to your requests." Melvin was silent for a moment before asking, "Will you also be visiting the strawberry shed this afternoon?" "Yeah," said Carter. "Great," said Melvin. "I'll pick strawberries for you to eat." Once again, Carter couldn't understand Melvin's brain circuit. He was already going to be made a spectacle for others to see. Was picking strawberries really what he should be focusing on here? In the afternoon, the prison welcomed a group of about 20 people for a tour, mostly comprising of executive directors from a large corporation. Back when Carter was still working as a court stenographer, he had seen many top corporate executives involved in embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, and such like. For people of authority who wielded power, it was all the more pertinent to educate them on the general law. "It's their time out of the cells now. Most inmates wouldn't be inside." The warden walked at the very front, giving the visitors a rundown of the prison. Unlike touring other places, prison tours came with more stringent requirements such as no separating from the group, no taking photos, no dresses, etc. Southside Prison had once hosted a group of middle school students. Several more mischievous students had run rampant out of curiosity, causing a lot of trouble for the prison. However, the corporate executives this time were adults who could follow rules, which made this visit easier for the prison staff to handle. Carter followed listlessly at the tail end, habitually observing every person in the group. As those in the management tier of a listed company, the average age of this group wasn't young. No matter the gender, they were all dressed immaculately, without the slightest sense of sloppiness that was prevalent among the younger age groups. "Hello." A woman at the fringe of the group, probably unable to hear the warden too clearly, made conversation with Carter. "Is it hard working in prison usually?" "It depends," Carter said. "Some posts have it harder than others, while some posts have relatively less to do. For example, his post as a librarian. In accordance with the lowest income with respect to the rest of his colleagues, he also had the easiest job." "You don't follow regular work hours, right?" "Most people don't. A full shift can span 72 hours, followed by 24 hours of rest." "What about you?" "Me." Carter was briefly puzzled, unsure how the question had turned to probe into his personal affairs. "I assume a civilian post. I clock in at 8 and leave at 5. "That's not bad," the woman nodded thoughtfully. "Are you dating anyone?" Carter started to get a bad feeling from this. "No." Unused to lying to strangers, Carter replied honestly for now. "How old are you?" the woman went on to ask. "Almost 30. To be precise, he was 27, but Carter deliberately kept it vague. "Wow, I couldn't tell. That's great. I have a niece. She's quite pretty and a hard worker. It's just that she's too picky and hasn't found a partner all this while. She's 29 now, about to turn 32. Right." This conversation was progressing exactly as Carter had thought it would. It appeared that there was one constant that could never be circumvented regardless of social class, and that was matchmaking. "My niece is very capable and has a high annual income, so she doesn't mind the financial situation of the guy and only bases her preferences on intuition. It should be hard for you to come across many girls with a job like yours, right? Let alone classier women like my niece. How about it? Would you like me to introduce you?" While it was true that Carter didn't come across many women in his job, this problem had never affected his love life. "Your niece is already 29? Carter subtly steered the conversation away. "You only look to be in your early 30s. This wasn't a lie. Those standing at the top of society took good care of their images, and this woman didn't look a year over 35. "Oh, you're too kind. Isn't early 30s a bit of an exaggeration?" The subject was successfully changed by Carter to discuss ways to maintain one's youthful appearance. The group toured around the cell blocks, then went to the mess hall and the showers, and finally to the strawberry sheds. Of the various labor, strawberry farming generated the highest income at Southside Prison. An agricultural expert who had been incarcerated once bred high-yield strawberry seedlings and later an engineering expert modified the greenhouses, further enhancing the yield of strawberries here. The strawberry shed was roughly the size of half a football field. Upon stepping in, a cool breeze would billow over. Although Carter had been working at Southside Prison for the better part of the year, he had never been to this area behind the admin block. Inmates start labor at 2 in the afternoon. You can see an inmate harvesting strawberries right now, the warden pointed to Melvin, not far away. Sweeping a glance across, only a sparse few inmates were at work in the large shed. Aside from Melvin, who the warden had pointed out, the rest were the more well-behaved inmates with good track records. It appeared that they had been deliberately arranged. 1017, the warden called. Come over for a bit. Melvin set down the small basket of strawberries in his hand, taking off the linen gloves as he walked towards the visitors. Carter had unwittingly walked up to the front of the group. At first, Melvin was looking straight at him, but after scanning the group of visitors, a barely noticeable change appeared in his expression, and he no longer looked at Carter. This is the convict that was involved in the financial crime case that shook the economy of the country, the warden introduced. After undergoing reformation at our prison, his ideological consciousness is significantly elevated. So, you're Melvin? A person, who seemed to have the highest status of the group, swept a scrutinizing gaze over Melvin. Does prison food taste good? Carter involuntarily found it weird when he heard this. The style of this conversation didn't sound like it was between two strangers, and from Melvin's expression just now, Carter guessed that the financial crime case could have implicated this company, resulting in huge losses for them. But Melvin's next words caused Carter to change his mind. Decent enough, Melvin said. Speaking of which, Lu Dong, do the shareholders know of the money that your mistress has embezzled from the company? The moment this statement was made, the other executive directors present exchanged confused looks at each other, unable to make sense of the situation. Lu Dong's face darkened. He spoke harshly. What nonsense is this? The warden also seemed unable to comprehend what was going on, so he chose to mediate first. That 1017, tell us about your life in prison, preferably with any profound insights you've learned. Carter had told Melvin beforehand to mention the political niceties that the warden liked to hear, such as thanking the prison for the ideological reformation, allowing him to gain new perspective and turn over a new leaf. By doing this, he could possibly enjoy special treatment in the future. However, what came out of Melvin's mouth was, insights. My present insight is that imprisonment is a good choice. I can go to bed and rise early every day. I have stable work and rest hours. I get nutritious and balanced meals from the mess hall, and the labor isn't too strenuous. More importantly, here, Melvin looked at Carter, the prison officers are also very cute. This means that we have good prison conditions. The warden hurriedly snatched back the flow of the conversation. Warden, can this still make inmates reflect? Lu Dong asked with a frown. It's like this. We also have confinement cells. If you're interested, we can go over to survey it as well. The warden hurriedly made eyes at Carter, instructing him to drag Melvin away. Then the warden led the visitors to the other side of the strawberry shed, getting another inmate to introduce the strawberry products produced by the prison. Carter didn't continue to follow behind the group but stayed with Melvin, returning to where he had left the small basket earlier. Do you know Lu Dong? Carter couldn't resist asking. That is Wu Peng's friend, Melvin said. Wu Peng was the CEO of HX Management, also Melvin's supervisor. If Carter wasn't mistaken, he guessed that it was highly probable that Wu Peng was the one who had framed Melvin. Have you done business with him before? Carter continued to ask. Not really. Melvin picked up the small basket and walked to the sink in a corner, washing strawberries as he conversed with Carter. There are improper dealings between him and Wu Peng. My case resulted in losses to many companies, but he made a considerable profit from it. This was the first time that Melvin was proactively chatting with Carter about the case. The clues that Grant mentioned abruptly came to mind, and Carter asked, Are the clues you have voice recordings of a conversation between him and Wu Peng? Melvin plucked the leaves on the strawberry, then looked at Carter. I don't have the clues on me. In view that Melvin didn't seem keen on going deep into this topic, Carter suddenly felt a bit curious, asking, "How did your meeting with Grant go?" "I got him to make sure that his unit was clean before coming back to find me." Melvin picked a red and shapely strawberry from the basket, shaking off the water droplets on it. Carter inadvertently slipped into his thoughts. The clues Melvin had likely weren't ironclad evidence, only enough to prove that there were issues with the investigation, allowing law enforcement to reopen the case. However, under this situation wherein there were too many uncertain variables, it was indeed unwise to rashly hand over the clues. "Officer James," Melvin's voice cut into Carter's thoughts. Carter lifted his gaze to look at Melvin. "Open your mouth." Before Carter could react, Melvin shoved the strawberry in his hand into his mouth. Carter didn't know if he was imagining it, but he felt that when Melvin was drawing his hand back, his thumb had brushed over his lower lip. He unconsciously bit down, and sweet juice burst out of the soft pulpy flesh, in an instant pervading his entire oral cavity. It was a little sour at first, causing his brows to furrow reflexively, but after he got used to it came endless sweetness, spreading down into his heart. "How is it?" Melvin asked. Carter's throat rolled, swallowing the pulpy flesh into his stomach. But reluctant to admit the strawberry was tasty, he said contrarily, "It's really sour. Are you sure you know how to plant strawberries?" These words frankly were unfair to Melvin. After all, the strawberry variety and environment were fixed. At best, he could only control some relatively insignificant factors, such as the timing of the harvest. "I don't know how to plant strawberries." Melvin's brows creased faintly. He glanced at the visitors, then looked back at Carter and said, "Then follow me, I'll show you another variety." With that, Melvin turned around and walked further in towards the corner. Following behind Melvin, it was only when Carter entered the corner area that he vaguely felt that something was amiss. There was a shelf in this corner, on which were gloves, watering cans, and such like, alongside a mop and a broom next to it. One look was enough to tell that this was a place to store miscellaneous items. Carter asked curiously, "Where are the strawberries?" "Here," Melvin returned, then circled Carter's back, pressing him into the corner, unceremoniously leaning in towards his neck. A stab of pain abruptly blossomed on his neck. Melvin pressed Carter into the corner, burying his head into the milky white skin, devoting his attention to planting strawberries. "Who said that I can't plant strawberries?" The surveillance camera was just overhead, and this corner storing miscellaneous items was situated right in its blind spot. But the warden and the visitors were not far away. As long as anyone looked over towards this corner, they would see the suggestive posture of the two men. A cool breeze flitted through the shed, and the freshly cultivated soil bore red strawberries, like a small audience, smiling merrily at the two men. The warden's voice drifted over from the other end of the shed, which was particularly resonant in this empty space. He felt breathless, as though he had dropped the balancing pole in his hands when walking on a tightrope at high altitude. Melvin seemed to sense that Carter was no longer putting his heart into struggling. He lightened the hold on him, and his fierce licking and biting turned into gentle kisses. In actuality, with Carter's strength, he was entirely capable of pushing Melvin away by this point. However, his hands, latching onto Melvin's prison uniform, were never able to find the strength. It wasn't that he couldn't find it, but that there was an evil little minion deep down in his heart, screaming with excitement, telling him to seize the opportunity to breathe in the pheromones suffusing the air next to Melvin's ear. Carter didn't want to be this way, but he couldn't control his hands. If he were to describe his mood now, he was seriously going insane.